Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Amateur Traveler, episode 639. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about lions and leopards and African wild dogs, wildebeests, waterbucks, and meerkats as we go to Botswana on safari. Welcome to a special episode of Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Let's talk about Botswana. This is Chris, and this is going to be a different episode of Amateur Traveler. I'm recording some of this while I am still on a mobile safari in Botswana in the Okavango Delta. I just got up on our first full day, and the stars are still out. The wake-up call this morning was at 8:30, and I have some time while I wait for other people to stumble out of their tents, so I thought I would start doing this recording. I got here because I was invited to come by Botswana Trek, and more about them later. But that is basically who is hosting me on this. We're on a safari with Royal Wilderness. And this is an odd place, a unique and wonderful place, but an odd place in the sense that it is an inland delta. It is where the waters from rivers that start in the highlands of Angola flow south into Botswana and then basically disappear into the Kalahari Desert. It's an inverted five-fingered hand of water coming into the desert, and so every place we go is a very sandy soil that has been brought to life in a great variety of life by this water that is flowing down from the north. Much of the area is national parks. Chobe National Park, probably one of the most famous, which we drove through just a little yesterday and just saw an amazing variety of animals. We saw wildebeests and zebras and lots of elephants and a few giraffes and bird life just unimaginable, and water bucks, and I don't remember what else we have seen so far. We flew into Maun, which is at the bottom of the delta, a city in Botswana. Flew in from Johannesburg, most of us, the best connection point to get in. And then yesterday we drove in. We're going to do 2 campsites, 3 nights each, and then we'll return to Maun. And then I'm going to go on to another location, which I'll tell you more about later. But we drove up the right side of the delta yesterday. So we drove on paved road until that ran out, and then dirt road. And we're driving for much of that time through cattle country. Cattle is very important in both the culture and the economy of Botswana. When you get married, your riches are determined by how many cows you have, that sort of thing. And then we drove as far as the cattle fence before things started changing. And basically there's a fence that was put up along the bottom of the delta to separate the wild animals on the north of it from the cattle at the south. And the idea originally was to protect the cattle from at least the perception that they would be interacting with wildebeests and zebras and might get hoof and mouth disease. So it was to protect the cattle industry in Botswana. Although now it has the opposite effect in the sense that it is sort of the line that says the cattle industry can't go any further north, and so it's protecting the wild animals. When it was put in, it was very disruptive. Apparently the wildebeest population dropped from 1 million different wildebeests in Botswana, because they do these wide migrations, to much less than that number now, tens of thousands of wildebeests instead. The zebra population was similarly affected. The elephant population was not, because they don't range that far. They don't have that great big migration. They stay within a day or two of water. And so that's one of the reasons we saw so many, is that a third of Africa's remaining elephants are here in Botswana and are mostly in this region. And then we drove further north and came to Chobe National Park, and then on into a privately community-run area. And I forget the name of it. We'll get that name for you in a bit. And that's where we're spending the night, here in a campsite, M15, in this particular concession. And I got up this morning. Again, the wake-up call was at 4:30, because we're going to go out really at first light. The stars are just still fading, and the sun is just starting to indicate that maybe it's going to come up here in a little bit. We'll go out at first light, because that's going to be our best chance to see predators. That's going to be our best chance to see lions and maybe the elusive leopard, or some of the cats, and some of the things that are nocturnal or do their hunting either at night or in the early morning hours. When you get up here on a mobile safari, let me just talk you a little bit about what home looks like. So I have a tent, and it's got a front porch, a place to stand on here that's got a ground cloth on it. You have to be careful as you're standing on any of the ground cloths, because they were camped among acacia trees that have thorns below them. And so I made the mistake of ignoring the advice to put on my flip-flops last night, and managed to poke myself going out the back porch. The back porch is where your shower is, your sink. You're basically a bucket of water that was warmed up this morning by the person from the camp who was greeting me this morning and woke me up at 4:30, was also bringing me warm water for that sink. There's a shower, basically a bag of warmed water that is back there in the back porch. There's also a toilet, which is a fresh pit dug into the sand with a seat over it. And so it doesn't smell bad, because it really hasn't been used that much. And you have a bucket of sand next to it where you can cover things up when you have done your business. So I went out on the back porch and washed my face. We'd taken a shower last night because we'd been on the road so much yesterday. You're wearing your sunscreen and your insect repellent, obviously, and your buff, which is the circular fabric that goes around your neck so you can pull that up when you're passing a car on those dirt roads so that you can not get a face full of dust. But people are starting to wake up now. We'll have some breakfast and then we'll go out and we'll see what we're going to see. So the sounds of the night creatures are starting to be joined by the sound of the morning creatures. This is me back in the studio back in California. I've recorded some more different segments that I'll use through the rest of this episode. One thing that didn't work out quite as well as we were driving along, I was trying to do some recording, but the safari vehicle is an open air vehicle, just so you have a picture of what we're riding in. And I'll play just a little bit of one. But we get a lot of wind sounds here, so I'm not going to play a lot of those. But to create a safari vehicle, what they do is they take a Toyota pickup truck and they basically do heavy customization for this truck. They put 8 seats in the back, and so you've got 2 in the front and 8 in the back, although Royal Wilderness will only use 7 of those. They won't use the middle seats. They won't sell those. And then you have a refrigerator back there. We had some places where we could plug in electronics as well, but there's nothing on the sides. So basically it's completely open. So when you're looking at leopards, when you're looking at lions or whatever, there's nothing but air between you and them, and you're hoping that you don't look like prey because you're in this great big vehicle, which is not on the food chain. It's got a cloth top at the top, and so you've got a really great view, but what you unfortunately have for audio is you have a lot of wind sound as you're driving down the road, and of course you're driving over these bumpy roads, so everything is jingling and jangling as well. We're out on our morning game drive. Not a lot of game this morning. We've seen an up-close encounter with a mother giraffe and her 2 juveniles. Hyena. Well, what else have we seen so far this morning?
Some different birds, spur-winged goose, lechwe, red lechwe, impala.
The rest of that clip I'll spare you, but it's funny, I was sitting there as I was recording it saying we hadn't seen that much, and then we started naming the animals we'd actually seen, and it was quite a few. What we hadn't seen were carnivores, and that's really what we were looking for, but later on that changed. We're all sitting here watching a leopard, which has decided to pose for us after going crashing through the brush to try and catch up with her. Johnny, you said that this is a leopard that's been around for a long time?
Yeah, she's basically the oldest leopard in this general area. We know of 4 babies that she's graduated in this area currently with a daughter that we see her with from time to time. That's already a year old, a few more months to go before she's up on her own. We can identify her by that notch on the right ear. We're thinking she's about 16, 17 years old right now.
We went driving, as I said, at first light, and then out to try and find especially some carnivores. We saw that leopard, which was just a real highlight, and spent a while watching it, trying to follow it. And then we took our coffee break, basically our morning coffee. You'd stop someplace about mid-morning, we're basically doing a game drive from, say, 5:30 in the morning till about 10:30 in the morning. We'd stop about halfway and have some spot where there were elephants that we could watch, or hippo pool, or something else interesting, and we would get out of the vehicle and turn down a table on the front and get morning coffee and maybe some biscuits or whatever, and take a break. And during that break, we heard that the mother had been joined by the daughter, and so we spent part of the rest of that morning following the mother and daughter. And as you heard Johnny, who is Johnny Ramson, who is the owner with his wife, Talia, of Royal Wilderness, talk about that leopard basically is trying to get rid of the daughter, get her off on her own. It's time for her to start foraging for herself, because in about 6 months or so, she's going to have another litter. And so we saw her kind of dissuade the daughter from following her, at one point even rolling in elephant dung to try and mask her scent so it would be harder for the daughter to follow her. But fascinating to watch this. And that was basically the morning game drive on that particular day. It's afternoon now, and we're taking a break between the morning game drive and the evening game drive. During the Heat of the day isn't the best time to be out for so many reasons. Won't see some of the animals that you'll see, like the carnivores you'll see in the morning game drive. You'd see a lot of animals coming down to the water hole, but it's just hot. This season is actually the rainy season, or it's supposed to be. Just a few moments ago, there were lightning flashes and rain obviously starting here, although a little bit in the distance, just a little bit of rain where we are. There's a little thunder. This is not the busiest time of year because it is hotter and it is supposed to be wetter. And once it gets really wet, it is going to be a mess here because this is sandy soil. This is really basically desert soil that has been brought to life by the waters that are coming down. And so they don't do nearly as many safaris this time of year. They'll do more in what is the North American summertime, their winter time, when you'd wake up in the morning and you'd need a coat because it's going to be a lot chillier, and then it would warm up during the day, where we woke up and it was shirt sleeve weather when we got up at 4:30, but by this time of day it's just a little warm. Fortunately, it's been cloudy, so we haven't had it quite as hot, but it's been warm this time of day, so a nice time to take a break. You can hear all the bird life here. This is a birder's paradise, especially during this time of year, this wet time of year, because this is the time of year where the species of birds that migrate up to Europe during Europe's summer are coming back to this area, to this wetlands. And so there are 450 different species of birds in the Delta region. So if you are a birder, this is a really good time to go, as well as a really great place to go. I cannot keep track of all the different birds that we have heard or seen so far. I'll try and get you a list later on. We've got a guidebook that we're using to keep score on all the different things that we've seen. They'll give you some idea. We started to recognize some of the bird cries as being alarm as we followed the mother leopard and her daughter earlier today. We could hear the things like the guinea fowl that were raising the alarm that there was a leopard in the area to deprive them of the ability to surprise some other animal or some bird.
One of our migrants. They're not here in our winter time. They'll be here normally from end of October, beginning of November, and they'll stay here for the rainy season and breed, and then leave around March. And it's go into the central tropical areas of Africa. Woodland kingfisher.
Woodland kingfisher.
Yeah.
One thing that I didn't capture on audio that I sure wish I would have. So I was recording there and you heard the thunder in the background and we saw lightning off in the distance. And this was really one of the first rains of the rainy season. They were coming a little late. And the elephants got very excited because there was moisture coming. And so while we watched about 100 different elephants trooped by our camp, heading with great excitement off towards the lightning to the west of us. And even our guide was excited. It's something you don't see that normally, even with as many elephants as there are and as easy it is to see elephants in that area. Seeing 100 at the same time, it was many different family groups, one right after another, as if it were a parade. Now, the other thing that happens when it rains, which we didn't know, which we found out later that evening, is all over the place there are termite mounds. And these are the 10-foot tall termite mounds. Oddly enough, the termites that are in those sort of mounds actually don't eat wood. They grow a fungus that dissolves wood. And these are long-lived colonies of termites. A colony may last 10 years with the same queen and 40 years total, going from one queen to another. But when it rains, the first time they get a rain like this, they open up a hole and they let out flying termites, male and female, that are going to meet the male and female from other hives and mate, and they very quickly drop their wings and then form other termite mounds. They bury under the ground. This is one of the reasons why the birds come to this area, is that the insect life gets quite plentiful.
which is good for the birds, but it's a little gross when you are here in that rainy season. And anytime you light a light in the evening, you get lots and lots of gigantic termites. I mean, like an 1.5 inch long wingspan. I think this is one of the reasons why most people don't come in December. They come in May when it's much, much drier. And then also the next morning, we saw flying ants. Again, they're not so much going to bite you or anything like that. They're just kind of annoyance when you turn on the light outside your tent and you get up and they're just swarming. It sounded like rain as the flying ants hit the tent because they also come out at this time of year. But after our break, we went out again on our evening game drive. And that is the rhythm of things. You go on an evening game drive until about sunset, and then you park someplace, might be in front of a hippo pool again or something like that, and you have a sundowner, which is your evening drink, traditionally a gin and tonic. A gin and tonic because that would give you quinine that would help prevent malaria, although I was more likely to have a Diet Coke or a glass of wine, but that is something that they have carried on as a safari tradition. While you're doing that, again, if you're in front of a hippo pool, it might sound like this.
Just a yawn fest right now. Must have been a good joke.
And while we enjoyed the hippo humor, we really didn't get the jokes. But that's the rhythm of safari, that morning game drive, that break, and then that evening game drive. Meals at appropriate times. This is a luxury safari, so the meals were all very good. They had a chef that came along. They also had people, as I said, who were bringing you hot water or were giving you hot water for your shower. If you left your clothes on the floor of your tent, they would come back freshly laundered. So it wasn't a camping experience like I was used to. The crew would actually get up and clean the safari vehicle every morning too. So I think there was one crew member for every one of us on safari. So it is a good experience. This is not a cheap experience. That depends on how many people you take. This is going to run you, if you go with Royal Safari, somewhere from $360 per person up, and that's per person per day, I should say. Cheapest if you get about 7 people, because that's going to fill up the vehicle. If you just want to go 1 or 2 people, that's going to be more expensive, obviously. And then as you go out on the game drive, your guide, in our case Johnny, is looking for signs, especially as you go out early in the morning. He's looking in the dust on the road for lion tracks, or we found rhinoceros tracks at one time on our second location. So we were in the Kwai concession, which I failed to mention earlier, which is that private concession just outside Chobe National Park first. And then we went over to the Moremi Game Reserve. Now, both of those are still in the Okavango Delta. It's just that they're in different locations. The other thing that happens is as you meet another safari vehicle, then both the guides will talk and they'll share their intelligence. Well, we know that there's wild dogs over here, or we saw lions there, or we are following them, or they also will hear on the radio. As I mentioned earlier, we heard on the radio that that mother leopard and her daughter were now hanging out and again went back to the same area. So that network of guides working together is very important. And Johnny says if you don't work together with the other guides, then they're not going to work with you. And so everybody does look out for each other. And they also look out for each other in terms of if you see somebody stuck. We had to, at one point when we were in the Moremi Game Reserve, take a break in the middle of chasing a pack of wild dogs, and I'll get more into that story later, to help somebody out of one of these river crossings that they got stuck in the mud. And that's what you do, because you're out past the cell phone range, you're out there with satellite phones, but help is going to take you a little while to get there. We got stuck at one time and had to call back to the camp to push us out with the truck. But if you're there by yourself, or if you do this as a self-drive, which you can do, there's an option for that. It's obviously going to be cheaper, but you're not going to have the intelligence that you're going to get from the guides. You're not going to have the kind of tracking skills that we have, where, you know, our Johnny is saying, okay, well, that's a male lion, that's a female lion, that's a hyena's tracks, that's a rhino tracks, they're heading in this direction, those sort of things. But you're also going to be by yourself if you get stuck, which is going to be a little bit of a problem. And there is a possibility of that happening, as I say, because you're in this Okavango Delta, which has water everywhere. You're constantly crossing over different rivulets of water to get from one area to another. And of course, every time we crossed, I had to think about the fact that there are crocodiles, sometimes really big crocodiles, in the water. We had a conversation later on about safety. First, we talked about some guides behaving badly, why you always choose your guide well. And then we talked about other issues of why is a vehicle safari safe.
Ah bon chien. Bonjour, je suis Theo, a tour leader with Explore, and this is Punti. He's helping us find truffles under the trees next to this beautiful vineyard. Maybe for tomorrow's cooking class? We call it semi-heure. Parfait. Semi-o'clock. Not everyone gets to enjoy a Bordeaux sunset this way, but you will if you explore. No, Punti. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel. Explore.
I was on a safari where, unbeknown to me, my colleague went and buried chicken bones under a tent, and then this hyena came and was digging for these bones because they have a great sense of smell.
Yeah.
Was digging for these bones under the tent, and the guests didn't have steel mattresses like you have.
Uh-huh.
They slept on the ground,
Okay.
on the floor. The bedroll was right on the floor,
Yeah.
so that's where the bones. He made sure to bury the bones at. So while this client is sleeping, suddenly the tent starts, being pushed up. Because this thing is digging underneath the tent and is trying to get to the bones, and the guest didn't sleep. So we get up in the morning and we're standing by the fire waiting for the guest to come, and this is when he lets me know that there was something going on last night about this client that he decided that he just didn't like for whatever reason, I don't know. So the guest came, told us about this. I went to the tent, the hyena was digging there, and hyenas just don't go digging under tents. Somebody had to have done something. So I went to him and I said, "Did you really? How's that possible?" And, I was very angry, of course, with him.
Yeah.
It's just things like that you don't do. Anything that can cause even the slightest conflict or possibility of conflict between your guest and wildlife, you can't do. Right? You must always be there with your guests all the time, in control of situations, or be in a place where you can say, okay, this would be a safer thing to do, let's move into this area, while you visually are seeing your wildlife.
My impression is from your demeanor that what we're doing now, the drive safari, is, unless you do something silly, it's pretty safe.
Very.
That you don't look like prey. With a walking safari, a little more risk.
Animals do not associate anything vehicle with food.
Yeah.
They have never been a case where animals or predators, for instance, looked at people inside the vehicle as potential food.
Right.
But even as they come through our camps when we are on the ground, we are not part of their natural diet. So they are naturally nervous of us and they move away from us. Right. So it is because of this that we can comfortably actually carry out walking safaris, even without rifles, knowing very well that, not being part of their natural diet, that they will be nervous of us, and they primarily run away from us. And when they come charging towards us, it's not so much to attack us or kill us, but to buy themselves space because we're too close to where they're feeding.
The one mother elephant 2-3 days ago wasn't too happy when we met her on the road. She wasn't in charge of us or anything, but she was giving the body signals of, I'm not happy with you being here.
Naturally mothers would protect young ones.
Oh, sure.
But I get the feeling that those females were just having a good time where they were. The food was nice. As to whatever it is that they were feeding on there was just so nice. They really just didn't want to be bothered to move away from from an oncoming vehicle. So they kind of let us know that, can't you just leave us alone type thing. They were not
threatening.
They were not threatening, no.
No.
But they made sure that we know how they were feeling.
But I think versus the bull elephants that have walked up to just kind of take a look at us and say what's going on, that didn't seem at all upset, just more curious.
But bull elephants also have their moments.
Sure.
I can tell you now. They go through a period of heightened testosterone.
Yeah.
Once or twice a year. Adult bull elephants in their 30s and up. where they go through this month-long heightened testosterone level, some 10 times more than natural levels of testosterone. You know them by solar and temporal glands, heavily streaming inside of the head, penis dribbling all the time, and because the urine stains on their legs as it dries off, it gives them this very strong pungent smell. Now, they become extremely aggressive. This whole testosterone thing makes them aggressive, unpredictable, very, temperamental. They take on other elephants. They take on things that they just get irritated by. Their preoccupation in this time, of course, is to find females to mate with. Many days they walk and walk and walk and don't come across these females. These are the males to be very careful of. But you can see them because they have walk about them and behavior that you really don't need to be tangled up with. If you go on YouTube and you find clips of elephants, African elephants, tipping over vehicles, it's often elephants in this very condition. Yes, it's called must, apparently Hindu word for crazy. People driving on their own cannot read their body language and they just get too close. And before they know, the vehicle is upside down and trapped inside.
So we were talking earlier in terms of why you picked these two spots for a 6-night safari, rather.
Yeah, any safari that you go on, you want to give the guest the best experience there is out there. Now, every other place that we go to at different times of the season will have its highlights. These two places that we've been to, Kwai and here, have been Moremi's best.
And here is the Moremi Game Reserve.
Right in the middle of Moremi Game Reserve right now, in the Klini area, and this place has had the best predator activity in the whole of 2018. In fact, I think in the last 2-3 years, it's been the place to come to if you really want to get into good lions and good dogs. And we've seen cheetah here, we've seen good leopard here. On a 3-night safari in this place, you won't be disappointed. And Kwai, this last trickles of the Okavango waters that will dry off not very far from Mababe village that we went past. But, it's wildlife as well. It's been the two best places to go to in the last 2 years. And naturally, it wasn't that difficult when we had to put together a 2-place safari over 6 nights, 3 nights here, 3 nights there.
And you were saying if you added in a 9-night safari, you'd probably add in...
A 9-night safari, I would go to Savuti. I think Savuti... Look, every place has got its charm.
Yeah.
Right? Savuti is very dry right now, it's very hot, and middle of the day like now, you'd be thinking, wow, why are we here? But, there's something about
There were moments yesterday where we were thinking that, yeah.
Yes, and as you're driving through this place, there's this very long riverbed that from a bird's eye view would look like a scar that cuts across the face of the Kalahari into this open savanna. This riverbed carries water, actually, sometimes. From 2010 to 2014, it had very strong water flow coming from the Leniente swamp, and it dried off very quickly, of course, after 4 years. But we know that it can flow for decades, and then it can also be dry for decades. The story of Savuti is centered around this river flowing and drying off. And when that water arrives in Savuti for the first time after, say, 100 years of no water or 30 years of no water, the transformation that happens there is amazing. It's like paradise. Now, depending on how long it's been dry, for let's say 20 years, there's some animals actually that would, Savuti residents that would know and remember when this river used to flow, and they know just what's coming. And Savuti becomes this green, lush paradise with lots of bird life, aquatic creatures. It's amazing, the transformation. But then, many years later, or a few short years later, the river may just get stolen away from this very life that depends on it. And the reverse transformation is also just as dramatic.
Like the fishing.
Yeah, like leopards taken to fishing. Of course, there's many animals that would unfortunately go on and die. Fishes caught in these drying pools, crocodiles, and some of the hippos that may not know of other rivers upstream will perish, creating, of course, a feast for the predator life of Savuti. But then the life, all this frenzy, all this feast, too, comes to an end and creates this rather harsh desertic conditions about Savuti. And then you have long-living animals like elephants that immediately reach down their memory bank and remember other rivers elsewhere, and they will go there and survive there in the driest of times and come back in the rainy season and keep coming back and forth until the river flows again. So, when you go there, there's always, as you drive through this riverbank, you look at it and almost imagine water coming in while you're there at this very moment, But it doesn't, of course. But then there will be times when it will come back, news go out. It's like an international phenomenon. People, will know, even in the United States, that Savuti is actually flowing. And there will be people that will book safaris just to come and see Savuti with water. It's an amazing place. So if another 3 nights, I would do that. And then, another 2 nights, I would go further to the Chobe Riverfront area where much of the Savuti, the Chobe National Park life would be at in the driest of times. That's your periods between May to about October, November, just before the rains. This is where you see the most elephants in one place, several thousands.
Because they have to come down.
Because there's a good source of water there. The food supply isn't at its best in the later times of the year. So you tend to see the drought taking its toll on these creatures. They lose condition, a little thin, can't wait for the rain to come, more grass.
Well, when you say seeing the elephants, I'm reminded of an incident that we've had on this trip. So when we see the lions, when we see the leopards, when we see the elephants, when we, all of the wild dogs and such, we're having an amazing moment. You've seen all that, but the one thing that I saw on this trip that got your attention was when 100 elephants marched by camp. That didn't seem like that's something you see every day.
Yes, of course. You're sitting there, it's starting to rain, the first rain of the season. Right? You come to a place that's been so dry. And as the rain started, before it started falling, and we could hear the rumbles up in the sky, we could also, not very far, hear the excitement of these elephants. But there was no hint of just how many elephants would be coming through. So we were sitting there, you and I, in the middle of the rain and listening to the to the rumbles of the rain, and then suddenly 100 elephants walk past our camp. You don't see that every day. And for many years that I've been working here, it's not in the rain where you see elephants coming in such excitement, of course. This is the other thing about them. They were not just 100 elephants walking by. They were extremely excited elephants. It was an amazing moment. Really an amazing moment. You don't see that all the time. Look, yesterday we were sitting here, it's much drier. The body language of the elephants we saw here yesterday, while fascinating to see because they're that close to camp, was not a celebratory one. They had been walking in the sun, in the heat, and just trying to get water to quench
Bill, you're
their
pointing at
thirst.
something. What are you seeing?
There's a bird right there, yellow, long tail. Sorry.
See, I know I've got my back to a lioness, so somewhere back here. So when you start pointing like that, I don't know what's going on.
It's the paradise flycatcher that
Paradise
we could
flycatcher.
take a picture of on the mobile safari. So
Got it.
we're here in Canada. They come to us, just like the elephants.
Yeah, but let's not forget those 2 leopards that we saw. The interaction between the mother. We were there.
Oh, yeah.
Just watching that. What's been a great relationship of a mother and daughter from a very young age. Now, at a time in her life where her mother is needs her to be getting on. Normally this happens when she's conceived now the next litter, and she is getting herself ready for looking after the new ones that are to come in the next 3 months. So the young daughter is, we could argue, very confused at this stage, but eventually she will get it, get the message and move on. It's not something we see every day. That's something you see every day. So I think we're kind of privileged to see that. Yeah. It's been wonderful. I think we've had some great sightings so far.
We have?
For a 6-night safari, which relatively is short by our safari sort of
You
measures.
said 10 was average.
Yes, 10 is average. I think we've had some phenomenal sightings.
Bill, I wanted to bring you in. Your relationship with Botswana
Yes, my relationship
started in 1990.
That's correct. I was a Mopato Wakahiso Peace Corps volunteer.
You'll have to define Mopato Watahiso.
Mopato Wakahiso. Wakahiso means peace, of peace. So maybe a person of peace.
Mopato is regiment.
Regiment, okay.
Oh, okay. See, I just learned what Mopato was.
So Peace Corps, okay.
Mopato is regiment. It could mean two things: Mopato regiment, or it could mean Department of Peace.
Okay.
So I came here with the Department of Peace to bring goodwill. I was a design and technology teacher in Etsa 6 on the panhandle of the Okavango Delta.
So, and Etsa 6 was originally a refugee camp from...
Yeah, it's a former refugee camp, one of 13, so Etsa 1 through 13. Etsa 6 was kind of the middle where the co-op market was. From wars in Angola, Namibia, and
back in the...
I think it was the 1970s. And mostly ending around 1980, I do believe. So when I arrived there, I was in a brand new school with my own house, fully furnished, classroom full of tools and boxes waiting to be opened. Most of them were still there. And then I began teaching design and technology. I was there for 2 years. But on my breaks, I was able to cross over into the Okavango Delta, which was where we were right on the edge of.
Right.
And from that early experience, I saw pristine wilderness. I had no idea how much wildlife I would see. So it was because of where I lived, I saw a lot of wildlife compared to other Peace Corps volunteers. So in a couple of instances, I would help organize trips and canoe trips and across the border into Namibia. And I would have friends come visit me because I was kind of in a desirable place to be compared to some of the other Peace Corps volunteers that were there.
Well, so when you're coming, he's actually here pretty new compared to when the parks get set up, because you're saying that, well, your dad helped
establish Moremi Game
where we are.
Right, in 1963 when it was...
and Chobe is only 2 years before that?
Just 2 years before that, 1961. Yeah.
So all relatively new at that point, transitioning from big game hunting
to non-consumptive.
Non-consumptive, okay.
Conservation.
Didn't know the correct term.
Right. That's what it became, because the hunting itself was actually pushing animals to the brink of extinction.
Yeah.
That had continued. We could safely say that certain species would not be...
But of course, it wasn't all tourists; it was also locals who were hunting.
Everyone was involved.
Yeah.
It was the current economic activity of the time, even to locals. It wasn't just tourists that were shooting, and there were no laws regulating how much you could, harvest. There were no seasons.
Right.
Whereas as it got later on with these non-consumptive conservation areas, the peripheral areas were still allowed to hunt in. But it would become more regulated. It got to a point where only certain species could be hunted and others were taken off the hunting quota. And the hunting could only happen at different time, at a particular time in the year. And it would be, closed off to allow for species to breed without any interruption and interference. So, but hunting in Botswana has since been stopped. I think it's nearly 5 years now, completely. They're still talking about whether to reopen hunting for specific species that are not endangered, but when that will happen, we have absolutely...
Well, and you also said that poaching here is not as big a problem as it is in some other places.
But being that Botswana has been a success story in Africa in many ways, politically...
It doesn't hurt if you discover diamonds.
It doesn't hurt if you discover diamonds immediately after independence. We didn't have to fight for independence. But we must pay tribute to our founding fathers in that they were visionary and set up the country's foundation of...
they didn't just grab for power like so many other places.
Very little corruption, and the proceeds from the diamond helped to establish a country that did not have any developments whatsoever at independence. To one of the success stories and middle-income countries of Africa, from one of 3 poorest to a middle-income country.
Oh,
wow. The smallest population now of only 2 million people. And then
2 million people in the size of France or Texas, depending on where your reference is.
With the least amount of corruption in across the whole of the African continent, and political will to preserve things that way of national importance
Yep.
and natural importance. Conservation is something that Botswana takes very seriously. After diamonds, it brings the most money. So there is some political will right from the top to invest
Well,
in
and the
preserving
diamonds
species.
will run out someday, but if you're
Eventually.
careful, the resources here where we are won't.
Should stay.
Yeah.
Yeah, should stay. The threat, well, as opposed to places like the Okavango Delta, is global
Water.
warming sees
Yeah.
as being having more droughts, prolonged droughts.
Right.
The El Nino is every second year,
Yeah,
every
yeah.
third year here. That means far less water. So places like the Okavango Delta are under threat from that.
Mm-hmm.
As in, the evaporation, eventually you can see it drying out significantly over a period of time.
Well, and
So
obviously,
that's
from
a big, that's
from
a
what
big
you're
deal.
saying, this whole area too has seen major changes. We're on the dry. We're basically on the dry lake bed from a lake from thousands of years ago.
Yes.
Back when the Chobe and the
The
Zambezi rivers also drained into here.
Exactly. Also drained into the interior or central portions of Southern Africa. Tectonic developments like the Rift Valley of East Africa extending into Southern Africa captured other rivers and redirected them to the east, leaving the Okavango Delta as the only source of the lake, and then it eventually went and dried off, of course, only about 10,000 years ago.
10,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is not that far back, really.
What is for me, but yeah.
Yes, yes.
And then Bill, you finished Peace Corps, but didn't stop coming to Botswana.
No, I came back in many different ways, including
How many trips?
I've kind of lost count now, but quite a few now.
But it wasn't until recently that you've actually just started to make your living from bringing tourists to Botswana.
So last January I did not renew my contract as a teacher in Hawaii, and decided to go, full bore with taking people and selling Botswana, because I think it's important to share this place because of its unique place on the planet, the Okavango Delta and the Central Kalahari Game Reserve. It's something that everybody should see once in their lifetime. I don't want to say bucket list, but if you want to say bucket list, it's been on my bucket list multiple times. And I keep coming back and sharing it. So, like, meeting Johnny in 2011, which was when the Savuti was flowing. We didn't exactly meet, but we told you the story about the leopard.
You've got a video which I'll link
Yeah.
to on YouTube if you give me the link
Sure.
about the
Hunting leopard.
hunting leopard. You could tell the story again.
Oh, okay. Well, I will tell the story. I've told it many times. I was here with my friend Randy from high school, and we were on safari in Savuti, and we had gone out on an afternoon drive, and we had stopped in an area where we saw lion and leopard tracks on the road. We came back to that same spot a couple hours later, and there's a handful of vehicles there. So we came late to the party, but we pulled up, found a little spot to pull into, and people were just saying, there's a leopard right there. It's in the grass. You can't see it, but it's there. So I got my camera, and I just started filming grass. And then the leopard pops up and walks right into my frame. So I had a perspective of the leopard where I could see her ears in the tall grass as multiple impala were passing from right to left. And she was just looking like,
Shopping.
what item on the menu am I going to pick? But what happened was all the impala just passed her, and she didn't jump on any of them. So I was about to run out of tape, so I had my friend cue up the tape and have it in his hand ready to go so I could make the switch, because I had in the back of my mind, I'm going to miss this. I really wanted to capture this on film. So I swapped the tape out, and then what happened, the bachelor of the herd nudged a female, and she jumped in front of this leopard. And it was like 3, 2, 1, boom. She pounced on the impala. They tackled, rolled a couple times. And then about 5 minutes later, the leopard was dragging the impala towards a tree. And at that point, there was a lot of people. So our guide Godfrey at the time told us we should probably take the pressure off of this cat and let her get her kill up in the tree, because it was getting dark. And that's when the lions would come out and the hyenas would come out and try to steal her kill. So we went back to camp, high-fiving, we were just so blessed to see this. And Godfrey got me excited because he said, "You got this thing on film from beginning, middle to end." And he said, I've never actually seen that myself. And he was the head of an anti-poaching unit, and he said, "You've got something here, so you should take this to National Geographic and show it to him." So that got me even more excited. So on my BlackBerry phone at the time, I'm emailing National Geographic. We go up to Namibia, Randy and I, and go dune skiing on the sand dunes. And so National Geographic emailed me back and said, "Yeah, we'd like to see this." And I happened to have a layover in Washington, D.C. for 6+ hours. So I went to their studio, popped the tapes in to the machine, and watched it in 3 different parts. And so the head of the digital acquisition said, "Yeah, we could do something with this, but crunch it down to a smaller video, more like a highlight reel." I did so. Didn't hear from him. They put it back on their server. Never heard from him again. So I thought, okay, well, I gave it my best shot. It's a great video. I'll put it up on YouTube. And when I put it up on YouTube, the lady who was with Johnny here, she saw it. She communicated with me, and then I said, "Hey, I want to share this with Johnny." And from the sharing of the leopard videos, how we hooked up and started doing safaris together since 2016.
I mentioned the encounter we had with the leopard. We also had numerous encounters with lions where we would go out and watch 3 male lions, for instance, as they got up from their daily nap and went off into the twilight to go hunt. They'd be hunting in the evenings. We had encounters where we parked just feet from bull elephants, as we mentioned earlier, and just got to watch them. There's a video that's up on one of the blog posts that I will link to from this episode that I encourage you to watch. But then probably one of the most amazing experiences we had was with African wild dogs. Now, African wild dogs are less well known to most people than lions and leopards. They are, in fact, the most effective hunters of the African carnivores. When a wild dog pack hunts, it's about 80% effective, meaning there's an 80% chance that some animal is going to be on the food chain. Some animal is going to be on the menu that night. When a single lion hunts, it's about 20% effective. When a pride of lions hunts, it's only about 30% effective. So very effective. Now, partially it's numbers. And Johnny knew that there was this pack of wild dogs. We counted 35 while they were sleeping, so somewhere around that number. Then we saw them in the morning and then came back in the evening when we figured they would be waking up, and then they would go out for their hunt. They don't hunt at night, and so we thought they would probably hunt at twilight, which they did. Now, a couple things about wild dogs. They look a bit like dogs and maybe a little bit like hyenas. They're spotted. They're also called the African spotted wild dog sometimes. They have kind of a muzzle like a German shepherd, but with these bat-like ears, large ears, and they make the strangest noise. Now, I swear to you, this is coming from some video I shot. And again, if you go look at a link that I'll put in the show notes to the experience we had, I have video over here of African wild dogs. This video is not sped up. This is the sound that an African wild dog makes. These are the wild dogs greeting other wild dogs that are coming in. And no, I did not speed up that audio, and no, the African wild dogs had not been breathing helium. They just have this high-pitched, squeaky sound that they make. But we had this experience where we went out on the hunt with them, and I referenced this earlier. We are bouncing along. Johnny is a fan of Formula One, and he was using all his racing skills on these bumpy tracts. To call them roads is really too much, and trying to keep up with these wild dogs and trying to anticipate where they're going. And I mentioned we helped somebody out who got stuck in the middle of when we were trying to do this. We came back in time to see them try and attack a group of wildebeest. And I have some video of this again in that article that I'm referencing, where the wildebeest have formed a ring around the young. I think they had 3 young and about 12 wildebeest, and this pack is circling them, and the wildebeest are having none of it. They're driving them off and staying in this circle to protect the young. And so the wild dogs decide that basically some dog is going to get hurt if they stay here. So they chase after some impala that they see, impala, the fast food of this particular area. And they are eluded by the first one, but they chase down an impala. And while we watch, they basically rip it to shreds, because this is what safari life is like with carnivores. That is really what they're trying to do. And Johnny mentioned that some people, some guests really get uncomfortable right around this point because they're saying, hey, the wild dogs murdered that impala. Well, the wild dogs are eating that impala. This is the food chain. This is the way things work here in Africa. And it's something you need to be aware of if you're going to go on safari, is you might run into one of these amazing experiences, but it also might make you just a little queasy at times. They look a lot less like your domestic dog when this feeding rampage is going on, for instance. When we got back to the camp, there was a little commotion going on because first there was something that passed through the camp that I saw. We decided it probably was a honey badger, but there was a question whether it was a civet, a small cat, or not. And then we talk about the wild dog experience.
That sounds to me like the leopard what's his
What
name?
is that?
Leopard
Scratcher?
that Ishak was talking about?
It's a metal.
Which leopard?
There was a leopard calling here before we got here, apparently.
Oh, okay.
Just outside camp.
Are you
And I believe that it must have been stuck. Remember, as we came in, we saw impalas across this valley here, the riverbed. I believe that that leopard was stalking those. It sounds to me like he's either tried to get one or he's just caught one and the impalas are responding to it. But all the snotting sound we hear across the plain here is impalas, and there's definitely a predator there, of a leopard-like or even lion, or it could be lion.
So we had an interesting adventure.
Yes, what a day. What a day.
So you haven't seen this kind of scene before with the wild dog?
No. Do you know, many times you come across dogs finishing off their kill. Mm-hmm. And again, it's just quite rare. It's not like every other safari you see this. Many times all you find is really dogs lying on the side of a road or on the road, and very little activity. But to sit there, I think we were there for more than an hour and a half in the afternoon. They got up, they interacted, made a lot of noise, and which was special enough in itself to see. But to follow them, watch them kill a rabbit, which was okay. We didn't see the rabbit, it went into the tree when they caught it. And then follow them as they were chasing impalas. Listen, lion calling, listen. Wow.
Is that close?
It's just behind the camp. Oh, God. Honestly, it's just behind the camp. This is like 150 yards.
So she is calling for the rest of the pride?
The pride, well, there were two lions calling this way, and I think it's about half a mile away. And this one is responding to those. Now, this is, as we are leaving camp, there were footprints not very far away from here. This is the lions, I think, that we were trying to find just after we left when we were going off to see the dogs. But anyhow, coming back to the dogs, to actually watch them chase and successfully catch something. Too. Yes, that was amazing.
That's extraordinary.
Seeing the
whole
wildebeest.
pack of 30-plus dogs surrounding wildebeest, trying to get the wildebeest to turn and run and expose babies.
Right.
And the wildebeest just not barging. That was fascinating. Fascinating. It was just amazing. But this is the beauty of this work. You just don't know what you're going to get. Every other day you're set off. Something comes up that you look at and you think, I thought I'd seen everything. You think you've seen everything, but something always comes up that just surprises you. It's amazing.
It's funny because when we go out on the game drives, there'll be hours where we're seeing some impalas, some hippos.
General game. Just being general game.
And then there are moments of
exhilaration.
I didn't think that would happen.
Yes, exactly. Now that's the right thing.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so what I'd like to say is that a lot of that is, I think, because the tracking skills of Johnny are so extraordinary.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he sees the footprints. He knows how certain animals are going to react or think. And that's why he can find dogs.
Oh, yeah. I think if I was driving around here self-drive...
You wouldn't see exactly.
I would see the hippos because they're in the hippo pools and they're pretty easy to spot.
Right.
I would see the impala because they're hard to miss. I'd see the water buck, but I don't think I'd see the carnivores.
But Sarah, the trekking skills help a great deal. And part of what we've seen, I mean, the other day we tracked lions successfully and we found them. But what also helps is, as we get into these areas that we operate in throughout the year, you tend to know your resident animals, kind of where to find, where to go to find. Yes, yes. Yeah. So it helps a lot when you know what your resident species are and where they hang out. And I think with the dogs, it worked out that way today. We went to a particular place where we felt our chances of finding them would be higher because this is where we see them more frequently. So yeah, it helps a lot. Yeah. But that was fantastic this evening. That was great. That was phenomenal. I actually want to get you guys in the car because I think we can find this lion on the road if it's not passing through our camp right now.
The lion in camp.
And it turns out we did not need to go look for the lion because the lion came and walked 50 feet away from us while we were sitting in camp. And I was able to get that. Fortunately, not as my last recording.
It feels a little odd turning on the recording and getting ready for a lion to walk past the camp and sort of like, and all we found was this recording.
Thank you, Chris.
And a can of pepper spray in the sky.
That would be so awesome. She or he?
It's hard to say. It's difficult to... There are people that would tell you, I can tell the difference between a male and a female. Now, I would put my money on it being a female because there are more females than there are males. Now, males are supposed to have a repertoire at the end of this sound, right?
Well, the tracks that you saw...
Yeah, the tracks are easy because the males, adult male tracks are much larger.
But I'm thinking the tracks you saw around the camp, you saw female tracks? Or
both.
You saw both. Okay.
Wait.
It's gone, isn't it?
Sounds like it's going the other way.
It's a different one.
He's right here. Wait. Sit down. Yeah, he's right here. You got it? You recording?
Oh my God.
Female.
Okay. Banging pots and pans.
How wild is gone?
How wild is that?
Okay, so what is that, 70 feet?
Is it? I would say 7, yeah.
Well, 3 car lengths.
The only thing
60.
More disconcerting than hearing the lion was when the lion stopped making noise, and you knew she was right there behind the truck.
No, last night she walked quietly past because we saw her footprints in the morning.
Yeah, exactly.
But this is the beauty of this. Many people home cannot imagine that you could actually be camping, sitting by the fire, and then a lion walks past 70 feet away.
With a lot of yelling and screaming.
Right. But the wildlife here is not into you. We're coming into their space, but it's not into you. They carry on with their lives, which is more important. They caught in their struggle for survival and looking for food. And they tried calling the other side. She's trying to catch up with them. She's been isolated, separated from them for a few days for whatever reason. And she's just trying to get up, to catch up with them and find out if there's going to be a hunt tonight and maybe something to eat for her, right? But we're not in her interest at all. We're not in the food chain. Yeah. And hence we can actually come here, camp, sleep in a tent, and feel very safe, even when there are lions this close to us. This is the beauty of this. type of safari. No fences. We want to be in the same space. And here we are, right there. That's the proof.
God's creatures.
Yeah.
All in the same space.
So this show is going to be a record length for Amateur Traveler, in part because while that kind of wraps up that mobile safari experience in the Okavango Delta, the only other thing I'll say about that is the song that you heard at the beginning and the end of this episode is from the crew, including Johnny, who were singing to us a traditional Botswana song. And again, I want to say that Royal Wilderness that I was with is owned by Johnny Ramsden and his wife Tasha, who runs a lot of the business aspects and does the real work, in Johnny's words. But this did not end my trip. I still had 2 more nights, which were spent in a luxury resort called Jack's Camp, which is down in the Kalahari. It's right off of the Kalahari National Park, and this is a high-end resort. This is a resort that starts at about $12.50 per person per night, and it's, again, tents, but this time it's tents with furniture like 4 poster beds inside. And honestly, this camp was awesome. It really made me laugh because the furniture is furniture that is traditional East African furniture, and it really looked like something right out of Dr. Livingstone, I presume, Stanley and Livingstone Explorers in Victorian England. In fact, there was a copy in my tent on the writing desk, because my tent had a writing desk, of the journalist Stanley's trip to go and find the explorer/missionary David Livingstone. And this is an area that Livingstone would have been in. You're in a very different area. You're in a more of a desert condition, not desert like sand, but desert more like savanna. And then there's also a large salt flats not very far away. In fact, when I say large, remember that Botswana is the size of France or Texas. This salt flat is the size of Switzerland. And normally during the other parts of the year, the cooler parts of the year, they will actually take you for a night. One of the experiences you can do is go camp a couple miles out into the salt flat where the animals don't come, even probably the insects aren't there. There's nothing there, and just sleep under the stars. We did not do that, although we did have our sundowner drink at a portable bar and set up right on the edge of the salt flat, which just made me laugh out loud. It was just such a perfect experience with this bar sitting there in the middle of the salt flats. The main tent, the dining tent at Jack's Camp, has a small museum that includes information about Livingstone and that kind of time period. It has skulls from different animals and information about the different animals in the area. It also has information about the Bushmen, because this is an area where the Kalahari Bushmen would have lived. And Jack's Camp actually employs small family groups from the Kalahari Bushmen to come back to this area and to live at the camp for 3-4 months at a time, and then to do interpretive experiences where they explain their culture to the guests, which is an interesting experience to hear people who are speaking that click-like language of the Kalahari Bushmen.
So all of the sticks that you see, all of the tools that we have here around here, so the spear handles, some of the canes, or the bow sticks, some of the walking sticks, we got them from the straight branches of the brand bush. So the tree here have very strong roots and very flexible when walking on it.
We also got a chance to see them playing some of the traditional games. One is just like jump rope. One is a little bit like mumbly peg, where somebody is having a rock and they're trying to keep the rhythm so they don't get their hand smashed between 2 rocks. One of the things that was a little more disturbing is things they used to do to fight scorpions against dung beetles. And the part that was disturbing was when the person was putting the scorpion in his mouth so you'd clean its eyes before you do that fight. But a very interesting experience. We would again do game drives in the morning and in the evenings. This is a very different terrain. This is an interesting terrain because you're in an area that just as we were leaving, as we were flying out, we could start to see the big herds of wildebeest and zebras that are migrating down here for the rainy seasons, when much of this would turn into wetlands, or basically a lot more of water, or a lot more green grasses would come. And we're just seeing the beginning of that. There are also some herds that are there full time. In fact, they have drilled some watering holes to try and keep some of the wildlife there year-round. Now, one of the types of wildlife that is there year-round that was just a hoot to see were the meerkats. And I've got some videos of the meerkats, and I'll put this up in a blog post that will be linked from this show notes, at least at some point. And one of the most interesting wildlife experiences the whole time were not just watching these meerkats, but after we were watching them forage for bugs and such, and they're going off scurrying around the grasses, our guide sat down near one of the holes, and the meerkat quickly ran up his shoulder and ran on his head and perched there, looking around for predators. And this was just a fascinating thing. And apparently the researchers of the meerkats discovered this behavior. It is a semi-natural behavior in the sense that these are still wild meerkats, but they're habituated. They're used to people being there. And so they don't have fear of people, and they're just looking for a high place so they can better see those eagles that might be coming for them, for instance. And so then we had the opportunity, if you're interested in having a meerkat perched on top of your hat, just stand next to the guide and be a little taller so that you're a better vantage point. And sure enough, now I've got a meerkat on my head. And there'll be pictures of that in the show notes. But, what can you say? It was a fascinating experience. And they employ 7 different people who keep an eye on these different colonies because, for instance, in a meerkat colony, only the alpha male and the alpha female mate, and the rest of the clan takes care of the young. But if they were to lose that alpha male or alpha female to an eagle or some other predator, then they would have to attract another wild meerkat to come in, and those would not be as comfortable with humans. So if that happens, they need to not send visitors to that particular clan of meerkats until they have an alpha male and alpha female. And so they're keeping an eye so they know what's going on, so they know where these animals are. Interesting. It employs 7 different people full-time whose job is to stand out here and keep an eye on meerkats, which is an interesting profession. Camp itself is very casual. As you come in, it's a small camp. There's only maybe 10 to 12 tents total. I think the last day we're there were the 3 of us, Bill from Botswana Trek and Sarah and I, and then 2 other people. And that was it. There were 5 guests total. And as you come in, you meet all the other guests, you meet all of the staff, everybody greets you by name. You're given one guide who will take you on all of the different excursions. Our guide was Aussie, who we really enjoyed meeting, but we also enjoyed talking to some of the other guides over dinner. It's a common table, and a very interesting experience. Very pleasant experience. Again, a high-end luxury experience. They did have a plunge pool there. Oh, it was a little chilly, but very warm weather, so it was a relief. And again, we had lions just outside the camp, and they made sure they walked you to your tent because there's a lot of privacy. This would be a great place for honeymooners, for instance. And so as you're walking to your tent, it's not 20 feet. It's way over there, so they make sure they walk you to and from your tent in the dark. This is still an off-the-grid experience. There is a generator at the camp that they run during the daytime to keep a fan going in your room, but they do turn it off at night. When you come into your tent at night, there are lanterns there, which does help with that whole Victorian England kind of vibe. There are refrigerators with cold drinks, so that would be different. And there is a place that you can plug in your electronics in the dining tent. But again, no cell phone, no Wi-Fi. But great experience at Jack's Camp. This same company has 3 camps in this area, and we've toured one of the other camps. It doesn't have quite the Stanley and Livingston feel, but all the camps there are really wonderful, very good service, obviously good food. But you would expect that at that sort of price point. And then they also have camps in other neighboring countries as well, like Namibia. And the name of that company that runs those camps is Natural Selection. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes to Jack's Camp if you're interested in more information about that. And that is probably going to wrap up this show. It is a long show, but it was an amazing experience. I do want to remind you that if you're interested in a trek to Botswana, botswanatrek.com, and that's the website for Bill Burns, who did bring me along on this trip. And he'll connect you with the right safari experience depending on what you're looking for. Of course, if you're listening to this in 2019, before May, we still have that experience where Amateur Traveler is heading to South Africa, Botswana, and Victoria Falls. So if you're interested in that, that is not going to be as high-end an experience as this one, but I think it will still be an amazing one with some of the wildlife that we talked about today and some of the ones that we didn't even talk about. Do check out the show notes because I'll have links to all of my photographs, for instance, that I took in this area. And even those of you who are not watching the iTunes Enhanced version should be able to enjoy the different animals and some of the videos that I shot there. With that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening, especially all the way to the end. Good for you.
Skandamizer.